Hello, ELA A30 students. It's Mr. Judge. Today we're talking about landscapes, and we need to first start off by defining the word landscape. What is a landscape? Well, as it says in front of you here in the video, a place or environment with unique features or traits. So, yes, anywhere could be a landscape, I guess, but we often tie the word landscape to an explanation of defining traits, anyways, that follow. If I talked about the Canadian landscape, naturally you're going to start thinking about all the things that make it special. And I'm probably going to explain them to you. The mountain ranges, the bodies of water that come up, the Canadian Shield. There's a great deal to it, right? Even as you grow forth into the territories, some beautiful and breathtaking landscapes can be found anywhere, really, in Canada. So those are all the traits that make it unique as a country, and that's kind of looking at a much grander landscape. But we're looking first to define what the physical landscapes might be. So we can pretty much define any landscape by categorizing into one or two of these, natural or constructed. Has there been any human impact? No. That means you're probably looking at a natural landscape. So if you think of down below, there's examples of rainforest, waterfall, mountain range, body of water, thinking of things like Lake Superior. I mean, ultimately, when we get the right view from the right angle and the right frame, we're looking at a natural place. A lot of these places, though, have been impacted by human destruction, by the human need to expand, and as a result, the majority of our world is becoming constructed. So, has there been any human impact? If you say yes, you're looking at a constructed landscape. Like cityscape, like New York City, Chicago, for Canada, I mean Toronto, Vancouver, Saskatoon, even Swift Current itself is an example of a cityscape that is, and it's constructed. Think about it, even a bridge. If you look at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, it is voluminous. It is huge, and it actually defines a great deal of what that coast looks like for so many people. And of course, it is a great structure built by man. At the same time, it's had a tremendous impact, and it's created a great deal of destruction in order for it to be built. The Great Pyramids might be considered one of mankind's greatest structural achievements, still figuring out lots of how they did what in terms of the construction of pyramids. But of course, it is constructed itself, as is the English Channel's channel, taking you from basically one body to body of land to another, crossing underneath the English Channel. It's man-made, and it serves for the purpose of transportation. But what about a bike path through a forest? What might this be called? This is not a philosophical question. This is not a question like if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? But we need to consider the fact that the natural physical landscapes, they have an agenda to grow and survive. Constructed landscapes typically serve utility, beauty, and durability for the sake of people kind, if you want to be Justin Trudeau kind of person and say it that way. This means that we have a clash of intentions. So we usually call something like this, a bike through a forest, or a bike path through a forest rather, a clashing landscape. There's clashing agendas there. There's clashing needs. There's clashing intentions. So it's really interesting when you start thinking about how many of the places in our world that we think are really natural have bike paths through them, have walking paths through them, have little small erected bridges that go right through the middle of these natural spaces, and we still deem them natural after the fact. They're probably not. They're probably clashing if we really think about it. So, what is the defining question for such a landscape? Has the natural intersected with the constructed? Or vice versa? Has the constructed intersected with the natural? If the answer is yes, you've seen and found a clashing landscape. We've got a beautiful one in Swift Current. Think about Riverdene Park. If you go down to Riverdene and you get right up next to the shape of some of that water, right at its edge, you can find places that are pretty much untouched by mankind. Now, you could go pretty far and say, Mr. Judge, well, mankind has polluted the water and the water's running right through it. So technically it is all impacted by man. We're not going to get that technical. I think we need to look at it more as, is there evidence of human impact that we can see? Let's use our eyes to be the determining tool for a lot of these landscape definitions and what meets the criteria. A greater organization or a greater greater organization. A greater landscape to think about is one that we come in contact with every day. It's a social landscape. A social landscape, though, has three aspects to it that you need to consider. First is the physical. It needs to exist somewhere. Some people might say, well, a social landscape now is the internet. Okay, well, then in that case, the physical realm is the digital world. But as far as social landscapes go, for the sake of this task that you're coming up to, which is a photography task, I'm not going to ask you to photograph the internet. So I'm going to consider more physical places for us. So we need to consider, is it natural or constructed? Human organization. How are people organized? So in places, we should be able to define and explain, is there a hierarchy? Are there people who are put in one place or another? Do people come and go? Is there an entrance and an exit? All those things make up the organization of humans within a social landscape. And of course, the cultural agenda. What is the cultural agenda? That guy should be back to there. Sorry, just getting a hang on my notes here. We'll see if we can figure it out. There we go. So, what is the cultural agenda? Cultural agenda could be something as simple as recreation. Could be something like education. And if you think about cultures as they vary across our world, that means the cultural agenda is going to change. For a lot of us within the Western world, consumerism is a cultural agenda. We seek to consume. Think about my very first trip to Italy. We stayed, my wife and I, with several people. They had hostels or they had Airbnbs, and there was only a small fridge. And my wife and I asked, well, we'd love to go grocery shopping and stock up the fridge. We'll be in town for a few days. And they looked at us like we were strange. And they said, grocery store? Yeah, we've got a really small one. We've got a market, but we go there every day. So clearly the Costco way of living doesn't necessarily apply as a universal truth across our world. It actually usually just applies to us North Americans who have deep freezers and a need to stock and store, or maybe that has more to do with our physical environment. It's being, we have a winter season that actually prevents us from being able to grow vegetables year round. Either way, what is the cultural agenda needs to be considered. So if we actually kind of pull apart a social landscape, we can think about some of these things. Think about a school. I've come up with an example here, and again, you can fill in your sheet as you go. You can take these first two if you'd like, and I'm hoping you'll come up with three more on your own. But a school's physical space is constructed. I mean, you've been going to public school now, or you've been in public education for a while, and there's a hierarchy within the school in terms of value put on people. That's right. You are students, and students are at the top. Teachers come below you in terms of that hierarchy, because ultimately the learning and the success of the learning is completely determined by what you can put out after we've taught you. Administration might come second, custodial and maintenance. So there might be a hierarchy of human organization here, but these are also all the stakeholders in education. Parents, of course, community members could be added to that list too. The cultural agenda is learning. Western learning is very different from anywhere else in the world. That's not to say there aren't schools all over the world, but how we approach it, the structure that we use, the formalities, some might even say the professionalism, that's not necessarily true, but there's a great deal that makes up the learning culture in the Western world, in the Western hemisphere. And a lot of it can be deemed necessary and a lot of it isn't, but I want you to think about how cultural agenda could be just learning itself. Let's look at a store. Starbucks. If you don't know, Starbucks is an expensive coffee shop. It's got a chain, I think, of probably close to or more than 1,000 around just North America alone. And the human organization element to it are baristas and customers, probably not in that order, but there's also supervisors, there's regional supervisors, there's owners, CEO, whatever. And of course, the cultural agenda is consumerism. So think about how consumerism, capitalism, socializing the public sphere, those are all cultural agendas that are met in this constructed place. So now I want you, if you can, discover three more examples on your own. What are three other places, maybe even in just Swift Current, that you can think of that have a physical space to them? You can identify the human organization, and of course, you can identify the cultural agenda. That cultural agenda might be something as simple as recreation. It might be socializing in the public sphere again. You might have a lot of other things that come to mind. So develop 3 more examples on your own if you want to complete the learning. You're going to need this understanding definitely for the sake of completing your landscape photo selection. If you have any questions, just email me. This is my first time doing a recording of a Word doc, just for the sake of maybe taking you through a note, something that hopefully you're filling in as you go for your own note's sake and so that you have a stronger understanding. If you have any questions or concerns about the recording itself, it being you needed more detail on something, again, just email me. Take care and move on to the next bit of the lesson. And you're also going to be learning about photography and artistic composition. And some of you are going to be able to draw on your experiences in photography 10, 20, 30. Thanks.